In this video, I'm going to show you how to make the second smallest baby Claire Beanie, which is the 3 to 6 month size, fitting heads with a circumference of 14 to 15 inches around. You will need about 2 ounces of worsted weight yarn, an H 5.0 millimeter crochet hook. This is Clover & More brand, which is my favorite brand of crochet hook, and I highly recommend it. A tapestry needle, and a pair of scissors. Gauge for this beanie is the same as the 0 to 3 month size, so 15 rows of 15 single crochets in each row should give you a 4 by 4 inch square. To start this pattern, we're going to start with a slip knot, and then we are going to chain 9. Next, we're going to single crochet back down our starting chain for a total of 8 single crochets, putting the first one right here in the second chain from our hook. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we're going to chain 1 and turn our work. For row 2, we're going to single crochet 8 in the back loop only. So if you're looking at the top of our row, this is normally where we would insert our hook under both loops, but we're just going to go right here in the back loop only and place our single crochet there. I'm going to do that all the way down the row for a total of 8 single crochets. Chain 1 and turn your work. Be careful not to make your chain 1s too tight, or your finished brim will not stretch properly and it will not fit the suggested size properly. We're going to repeat row 2 until we have a total of 38 rows for our brim, putting 8 single crochets in the back loop only, chain 1 and turn. Okay, I just finished row 38. Now I'm going to chain 1 and pull that out for a little bit, and we are going to do some measuring. I'm going to give my brim a nice tug and get my tape measure. Okay, let's go ahead and measure this guy and see where we're at. We're looking at about 10 1/4 unstretched, and it stretches to about 16 1/4. So that will for sure fit heads with a 15 or 14 inch circumference. Now we are going to close our brim, and to do this, we're going to fold it in half so that the ends meet, and line the stitches up from the last row with the stitches on the first row, and then we are going to slip stitch them together, making sure each one is lined up nicely. So we're going to start by going into the first stitch on the first row, and then into that same stitch on the last row, and pulling through all the loops on our hook for a slip stitch. That's 1, second stitch, pull through all, that's 2, and we're going to do that all the way down for a total of 8 slip stitches. Chain 1. Now we are going to put the seam we just made on the inside of the beanie and start working on the body of our beanie, right side facing out. For row 1 in the body, we are going to single crochet around this opening for a total of 43 single crochets. To get to 43, we will have to do some increases since we only had 38 rows in the brim. So you're going to put 5 increases along the brim for row 1 and just space them out like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Space them out along the circle just so they're not all bunched up next to each other. You will have to make your own spaces for your hook to go since we are working on the raw edge of our stitches. I will do a few here with you on camera. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to go ahead and put my first increase right there in that same spot. 7, and I'm going to keep going all the way around until I get 43 single crochets, and that will include putting in 5 increases. After we get 43 single crochet stitches, we're going to join into the top of our first single crochet stitch and chain 1. Now we are going to do row 2 of our body, and that is going to be our first puff stitch row. We're going to put our first puff stitch right here in this stitch up close to our chain 1. So to do a puff stitch, you yarn over, insert your hook, grab your yarn, pull up a loop, and do that 3 more times. Yarn over, insert your hook, grab your yarn and pull up a loop. That's 2, 3, and last one, 4. Yarn over, pull through all the loops on your hook, and then chain 1 to secure it. Our next puff stitch, we're going to skip this stitch here and go into this guy. So yarn over, grab our yarn, pull through all the loops and chain 1, and we're going to repeat that all the way around for a total of 22 puff stitches in the row. Okay, this is our last puff stitch in the row, and that gives us 22 puff stitches. Now we're going to join into the top of our first puff stitch and chain 1. For row 3 of our body, we're going to do the same thing as row 2, but our puff stitches are going to go into the chain spaces from row 2, and we're going to alternate where we put our first puff. Since our first puff in row 2 was right up next to the chain, our first puff in row 3 is going to be all the way over here into this gap. So that's where we're going to put our first puff stitch. Oops. Then chain 1 and put a puff stitch in each chain gap from row 2 all the way around again for a total of 22 puff stitches in the row. Okay, we have one more puff stitch in row 3, and it's going to go right here in this little chain space from the previous row. That gives us a total of 22 puff stitches in the row. We're going to join into the top right here, chain 1. Now for row 4, we're going to just repeat row 1. So our first puff stitch is going to go right here, right up next to our chain. Chain 1, and then we're going to put 1 puff stitch in each chain space from the previous row until we have a total of 22 puff stitches in the row. Okay, after we finish our last puff in the row, we're going to join right here into the top of our first puff chain 1 and get ready for row 5. Row 5 is just going to be this row, which was row 3 all over again, where we put our first puff stitch all the way over here in this chain 1 gap. And chain 1, continue to puff and chain all the way around for a total of, again, 22 puff stitches in the row. Okay, our last puff stitch is going to go right here in this chain space. Join into the top of our chain right here and chain 1. And row 6 is going to be 22 puffs again one more time, and then we will start our decrease rows. Our first puff stitch is going to go right here into this gap right up next to our chain up 1. And we're going to continue to put puff stitches in the chain gaps from the previous row all the way around for a total of, again, 22 puff stitches in the row. When we finish this row and come back, we will start our decrease rows, and we are almost finished with this little cutie. Join in the top of our first puff stitch and chain 1. Now for row 7, we are going to start our decreases. We're going to put a puff stitch all the way over here in the first chain 1 gap, and then we're going to decrease over these 2 chain 1 gaps right here. So let's put our first puff stitch all the way over here and chain 1, and now over the next 2 gaps right here, we're going to put our puff stitch decrease, yarn over, insert our hook into the first gap, grab our yarn, pull up a loop, do that 2 more times in the same gap, 2, 3, and then we're going to yarn over and go into the next gap for 3. That's 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to yarn over and pull through all the loops on our hook, and then chain 1 to secure it. Now we're going to do 3 puff stitches, 1, 2, 3, and that's going to be our repeat for the row. It goes decrease and then 1, 2, 3 puffs, decrease, 1, 2, 3 puffs. And we're going to do that all the way around. I'm going to show you one more time the puff stitch decrease right here. 1, 2, 3, into the next gap, 1, 2, 3, yarn over, pull through all the loops on the hook, chain 1 to secure. Then I'm going to continue with 1, 2, 3 puffs, since that's our repeat. Okay, did you see that? So this yarn split on me right here. I didn't see that until before, so I'm going to have to frog this and then come back, but I will come back to 2 puffs after a decrease, and I will be right back. Okay, I'm not sure how many times I had done the repeat before I had to frog and fix, but we've got puff stitch decrease, puff, 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 puff stitch decrease, puff, puff, and I'm going to do another puff right here. Now we've got a puff stitch decrease, and then over the next 2 chain 1 gaps, and then puff, puff, puff. Then we're going to puff stitch decrease over the next 2 gaps. 1, 2, 3, next gap, 1, 2, 3, pull through all and chain 1. Now Our repeat says to puff, 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 and then to decrease, but we don't have enough chain gaps left for that, so we're just going to end with 4 puff stitches. That will give us a total of 18 puff stitches in the row. Join into the top of our first chain up right there and chain 1. Now for row 8, we're going to put a puff right here in the first space right up next to our chain. And then 2 more puffs, and then I will show you our repeat. Now we're starting our repeat, which is decrease, puff, puff, decrease, puff, puff. We're going to do that all the way around for a total of 14 puffs in the row. Decrease, and then a puff stitch, and then a puff stitch. Now we're going to decrease again. And then 2 puff stitches. And we're going to decrease. Two puff stitches. Decrease, now we don't have enough chain 1 gaps to do 2 more puff stitches, so we're just going to put 1 more puff stitch right there in that last chain gap, and that's going to give us a total of 14 puff stitches in the row. Go ahead and join into the top of our first puff stitch and get ready for row 9. We're going to start by putting a puff stitch all the way over here in the first chain 1 gap. And then we're going to decrease over the next 2, and that will be our repeat for the row. It's just going to go puff stitch, decrease, puff stitch, decrease, all the way around for a total of 10 puff stitches in the row. Here comes the decrease. Then a puff stitch,
and a decrease, and a puff stitch, and a decrease, and a puff stitch.
We do not have enough room to do another decrease, so we're just going to put 1 more extra puff right here in the last chain 1 gap for a total of 10 puff stitches in the row. Join into the top of our first chain up 1 and chain 1. Now for the last row of puff stitches, we're just going to decrease all the way around for a total of 5 stitches. And then this guy, 1, 2, 3, that's our decrease. We're going to do that all the way around until we've done 5 decreases. Last one. There we go. Join into the top of our first, which in this case was a decrease. Now we are just going to single crochet 1 time in each stitch around for a total of 10 single crochets. 1, 2. Be careful not to just go around the actual chain stitches and go through them instead. This is just personal preference, but I like the look of that over the look of just going around. You can do whatever you'd like. You are the crocheter. After we do our 10 single crochets, join into the top of the first single crochet, and then you can tie off. And I am just about out of yarn. Look at that. Now you can cut a tail long enough to close the top of your circle. So just like a little over a foot or less, slightly less. Using your tapestry needle, we're going to go ahead and close the top of our circle. I like to do the magic close method. To do that, you're going to insert the tip of your hook under the front loop only of the first stitch, then wrap around and pick up the front loop only of the second stitch, third stitch, and we're going to do this all the way around, and then pull through, and then continue picking up just front loops until we've picked up all 10 of them and pulled through all 10 of them. Then we're just going to pull our tail, and that will close up that little circle for us. And I like to run my tapestry needle under all of the loops again and keep pulling it extra secure so I know that my hole is completely closed. And then I'm just going to pop my tapestry needle down into the body of my beanie and out the bottom, and then flip my beanie inside out and run my tapestry needle a few more times up here to sew in my tail the rest of the way. Then after I am certain that my tail is sewn in and it will not pop its ugly face back out on one of my customers, I can go ahead and snip off this tail and sew in my first little tail down there on my brim. Then go ahead and snip that guy off, and our 3 to 6 month baby Claire Beanie is complete. Now let's take a few measurements so we can see the finished size. Our beanie is about 6.5 inches in the widest spot and about 5 3/4 inches tall. And let's go ahead and compare it to our 0 to 3 month beanie size. This little guy. They're pretty subtle differences, but they are there. Babies' heads change so fast. Stay tuned for the next size, which is 6 to 12 months. It is coming up next.